My dear listeners, once again, this is retired Lieutenant Colonel Samsudeen Sarr, former commander of the Gambia National Army, being back today reading my same book, Testimony of a Gambian Military Officer and a Diplomat, on this Friday, November 3rd, 2023. I'll be reading chapter 13, titled Promising October and Bloody November. While the month of September was undoubtedly the most challenging period of my illegal detention, October brought a glimmer of hope that we might eventually return home, even though the exact timing remained uncertain. However, the harrowing events of November shook us to the core, revealing the cruelty of the young officers we had once considered harmless. Despite this, it's essential to note that the actions of the 11th of November did not directly affect us, the detainees, but only served to further discourage us. On Sunday, 11 September 1994, 3 days after I embarked on my pretentious course of action, something changed for the better. On that Sunday morning, a team of police officers arrived at the prison to record our statements for the very first time. This marked a turning point, as I sensed that my pretense had created or may have contributed to an opening leading to the lifting of all restrictions on the detainees on that Sunday morning. As per the predetermined process, each detainee was escorted to the commissioner's main office to provide a statement for the investigating police officers. Despite my desire to call off my charade and resume normalcy, the situation demanded otherwise. I remained seated, clutching my towel, and attentively listened to the accounts of my fellow detainees as they explained their experiences at the commissioner's office. The process remained consistent. Every individual was to narrate their journey from the onset of the coup on the 22nd of July 1994 to their moment of arrest. In my case, I kept on reminding myself of being arrested on the 27th of July 1994, while my detainers, Singate and Topper, ironically got arrested on the 27th of January 1995. A very dramatic incident I will discuss in a special chapter later. Their statements, submitted unanimously, declared the innocence of all detainees, highlighting the unjust nature of their detention. Finally, it was my turn to join the procession from my cell and face the investigators, following the same path as my peers. Prison officer Thompson Jaju, maintaining his stance that I was merely acting, arrived to escort me, accompanied by two bodyguards poised to employ force if I resisted. While I had no intention of putting up a struggle, their presence served as a reminder of the gravity of my performance. With my towel still draped over my head, I move along. The situation took an awkward turn when Police Inspector Amadou Baji, commonly known as Tunnel Baji, emerged as one of the investigators. To my dismay, we share a history, having grown up on the same street in Serekunda. His younger brothers, Dubi and Chaka Baj, had been my close childhood companions. Despite his efforts to elicit cooperation, my resolve remained steadfast, impervious to his attempts. Frustrated, Baji eventually conceded, his disappointment evident as he chided me for succumbing to emotional strain. He questioned my capabilities as a soldier, incredulous that I could not endure this seemingly minor trial given my training to confront far greater challenges on the battlefield. Adding a personal touch, he claimed my mother, Ajiya Rohigay, had expressed her longing and sent her regards through him. I knew that his statement was false. P.O. Jaju interjected, asserting his conviction that my behavior was a ruse. He cited the example of Lai Silla, a detainee from the 1981 abortive coup, who had faced accusation of killing innocent civilians. Silla had employed a similar facade, feigning paralysis from the waist down. Ultimately, after serving years on death row, he was pardoned and resumed life seemingly unaffected. Judge's comparison drew parallels between Silla's actions and my own, implying that my actions were in vain fake. Judge's assessment held merit, although the circumstances and motives differed significantly. My actions had already borne fruit, and I remained committed to my cause until I achieved my objective. Perhaps I contemplated the police might facilitate my transfer to a medical hospital, presenting an opportunity for me to devise an escape plan from the country. At last, the investigators, including their leader, Mr. Tonel Baji, grew increasingly angry with P.O. Jaju's lack of sympathy towards me. Consequently, I was escorted back to my cell without giving my statement. The following day, Monday, 12 September 1994, nearly every detainee visited my cell to express their sympathy and offered words of encouragement. They urged me to remain resilient, assuring me that the perceived threat was no longer imminent. However, two officers, Second Lieutenant Yankuba Dabo of the GNA and Second Lieutenant Sane of the TSD from the State House, conspicuously avoided my cell, never once approaching to even exchange pleasantries. Then, as if a long-awaited miracle, Lieutenant Karamu Jiba, TSG, renowned for his supernatural abilities, came to pray for me. He requested that they remove my towel and hold me down so he could firmly grasp my head for the special prayer. I cooperated with the prison guards, closing my eyes to shield myself from any unusual gestures, determined not to let even a hint of a smile escape. With a strong grip on my head, Lieutenant Jiba recited lengthy verses from the Quran while spitting over my face and hair, a distasteful and unpleasant ritual, very nasty. After the ritual, he proposed to the commissioner that I be moved to a different cell away from cell number 1, which he claimed was inhabited by an evil spirit. It was a claim I found inconceivable, calling him out as a liar in my thoughts. Another veteran prison officer validated the existence of an evil presence in that specific cell, cell number 1. One recounting an incident from 1981 where a detainee fell seriously ill and ultimately died after being transferred to Banjul Hospital. The revelation prompted some shocked responses from fellow detainees, including a melodramatic exclamation of Allahu Akbar from Sergeant Singate, a fellow detainee in cell number 7. I really struggled to suppress a laugh from the sergeant's reaction. I was promptly relocated to cell number 5, previously occupied by RSM Seka, which had been closed following his transfer to confinement block number 1 after enduring a torture. Just 2 days later, I had made a full recovery from my supposed illness. Subsequently, I approached the commissioner and requested an appointment with the police investigators to provide my statement. They returned the same week and duly recorded my written statement as required. However, following the harrowing experiences of Major Jong, Captain Charen, and RSM Seka, who had endured the horrific torture, forced disappearances, and a state execution on the 6th of September, the tormentors inexplicably ceased their activities. The whole idea was to make us believe that they were actually shot and killed. Although the prison guards, sympathetic to our plight, had since informed us that they were all safe and alive. Though under strict restrictions not to share this information with anybody. It was intriguing to observe the transformation of the detained officers within the jail. They had taken on an almost godly aura, engaging in excessive prayer day and night, whether in bed or out, during meals or showers, every blessed minute. By October, the intensity of our post-torture confinement eased considerably. Our family members were now granted visitation rights. We now had regular showers and could spend extended periods outside our cells in the open yard, where the warm embrace of sunshine became a cherished luxury. And surprisingly, our salaries were still being paid, with the funds being received by our spouses. Food supplies like biscuits, milk, coffee, tea, sardines, corned beef, and sauces were sent in quantities far beyond our consumption needs. While cooked meals were not allowed, we did have the privilege of holding on to some money against regulations. This currency allowed us to sway the guards through bribes for special favors, such as obtaining newspapers or purchasing items that required bending the prison rules. Prison officer Mambore was eventually released but was dismissed from his post after dedicating over 15 years to his service. As October drew to a close, Captain Mamadi Sane, Captain Lai Demba, Captain Bernard Davis, Lieutenant Kante, Lieutenant Kinte, Lieutenant Sane, and Lieutenant Dabo were all released without facing charges or appearing in any court. Whilst Captain Sane and Davis were promptly retired from the army, the other officers were reinstated within their respective units at their usual ranks. Captain Lai Demba, the TSG guy, was assigned back to the police force, but he later sought refuge in England. It remained uncertain whether he left the job voluntarily or was dismissed. The release of these officers ignited a glimmer of hope within us, suggesting that our own freedom might be within reach. The fact that released army captains were discharged or retired contrasted sharply with the infinite languishing within the penitentiary. Later, after my release, I discovered that when the State House compiled the list of detainees released in October, Chairman Jani had included my name. However, Singate and Samate crossed my name off the list. They crossed my name off the list. Vice Chairman Singate carried out a subsequent interview with the BBC, upholding notion that we were considered suspects and were being evaluated based on the legitimacy of our individual cases. He emphasized that any detainee found guilty of criminal activities would face appropriate punishment, while those found innocent will be set free. This approach epitomized the tale of detaining the innocent until proven guilty, contradicting the fundamental principles of any legal system. Nevertheless, I constantly reminded myself that this situation stemmed from a coup d'etat orchestrated by the Gambian soldiers, indeed a breakthrough coup d'etat. A well-known author, an American political scientist, Samuel P. Huntington, categorized coup d'etats into three distinct types: breakthrough coup d'etat, guardian coup d'etat, and veto coup d'etat. Breakthrough coup d'etats involve non-commissioned officers or junior officers in the army seizing power from a legitimate government and establishing their own elite bureaucrats to govern the country. However, these coups often lead to significant problems within the armed forces organizational structure. This was evident in the Gambia, where a breakthrough coup took place, resulting in a new government that faced similar challenges. The second type, guardian coup d'etat, as described by Huntington, tends to be more progressive. These coups are often orchestrated by senior military officers and typically do not involve major alterations in the government institutions or personnel. Guardian coups are motivated by a desire to improve public order, efficiency, or combat corruption. An example of this type of coup d'etat occurred in Mali in 1991 when President Moussa Traoré, a dictator, was overthrown. This led to a transitional government, the introduction of an inclusive constitution, and ultimately a free and fair election that brought President Alpha Omar Konaré to power in 1992. However, veto coup d'etats, the third category in content's classification, share similarities with Guardian coups as they involve senior military officers taking control. However, the key difference lies in the repressive and brutal nature of the military's action in veto coup d'etat scenarios. These coups often aim to suppress mass participation and social mobilization. An example of veto coup d'etat can be seen in the rise of late General Sani Abacha to power in Nigeria. It's important to note that a related concept, counter coups, is closely intertwined with Huntington's three coup d'etat categories. Whenever a coup takes place, a counter coup attempt more often than not follows, potentially persisting over time. Counter coups can, however, usher in all of the three types of military governments. Despite the challenges, we managed to maintain our resilience and sporadically found solace in moments of humor. As the reality of our predicament settled in, being on death row, our spirits plummeted to their lowest depth. I occasionally playfully tease those who had been captured with their potent jujus, suggesting that they lacked faith in their charms, given how Singate and had apprehended them so effortlessly. A designated cell had even been converted into a makeshift juju storeroom, packed to the brim with all sorts of animal horns, skins, tails, plant roots, and peculiar underwear adorned with cowries and inscriptions in Arabic scripts, items that my fellow inmates had worn on the day of the coup. Some believe these to be bulletproof talismans, while others sought extra powers like invincibility during combat. Yet it became apparent that none of these jujus worked as intended when Singate and Topper brandished their guns and led the officers into Mile 2 prisons with ease. At the mercy of the AK-47 assault rifle, wielded by a deranged individual, it seemed that everyone's faith in the power of these charms had waned. They also teased me for my perceived corruption, claiming that I had embezzled state funds within 24 hours of my ministerial appointment. That gave Singate reason to shackle me and throw me into jail alongside them. Politically, the AFPRC military government was propagating their success both nationally and internationally. In a prominent political rally held at the National Independence Stadium in Bakau, shortly after they seized power and detained us, Chairman Jani addressed the jam-packed football field, claiming that their government will maintain its grip on power for 4 years before relinquishing control to civilian rule in the country. However, mounting national and international pressure eventually compelled the junta to consider their timeline for staying in power before conducting democratic elections. Reluctantly, they established a civilian consultative board tasked with gauging the sentiment of the Gambian population. This board embarked on a nationwide tour to gather opinions on the timing of the transition to a democratically elected government. Upon completion of the commission's tour across the length and breadth of the country, a report emerged reflecting the overwhelming demand from the Gambian population for a maximum of 2 years before a return to civilian rule. The populace expressed a resolute desire not to endure military rule for more than 2 years. Within the prison walls, all of us detainees found solace in this 2-year limit. If our release was withheld beyond that time frame, the onus will fall on the emerging constitutional government to set us free. Any other course of action would violate democratic principles and our fundamental human rights. It would be contradictory to establish a democratic government and continue the unlawful indefinite detention of us, the detainees. At the very least, we should have been formally charged and brought to court for the alleged crimes. On a more positive note, the release of some of our comrades in October injected a renewed sense of optimism after a prolonged period of hopelessness. This event marked the most uplifting development since that harrowing night in early September. The disappearances of Jonga, Charen, and Seka were understood, though far from reassuring. We occasionally pondered whether they would ever rejoin our ranks. Unfortunately, barely 2 weeks after the release of some of the detainees, distressing reports reached us on November 12, 1994. The general report indicated that Lieutenant Sekuba Bari had once again spearheaded another attempt to overthrow the AFPRC government, mobilizing a group of young officers and a number of soldiers. Regrettably, the counter-coup effort ended in failure, with Lieutenant Bari and a few of his co-conspirators reportedly losing their lives. The blow was particularly devastating when the informer implicated Captain Mamadi Sane and some of the recently freed detainees as potential suspects in the failed counter-coup. However, a highly credible source eventually discredited the alleged involvement of Captain Sane or any of the released detainees. Clearly, had Captain Sane been implicated in the counter-coup, it would have provided Samate with the pretext he needed to persuade his hesitant associates to carry out our execution by firing squad. Details of the incident mark yet another sensational event. On November 12, 1994, like any other day, I rose early in the morning for prayer, only to be greeted by a troubling scene outside my cell window. The familiar watch towers displayed an unusual sight. Heavily armed soldiers in unprecedented numbers occupying their posts. This sight had become an ominous signal, indicating that something had gone awry. or was on the brink of going wrong. The day took a more unsettling turn when the prison guards arrived late that morning to release us from our cells for our customary morning task. The entire facility had been placed under lockdown, and we found ourselves engulfed in an atmosphere of anxious uncertainty. Lieutenant Moro Mendy and a handful of fellow detainees recounted their experiences, revealing that they had heard peculiar noises emanating from the prison's main yard late into the previous night. The echoes of heated argument among male voices had pierced the stillness just before midnight. As the girls eventually allowed us to tend to our daily routines, emptying and cleaning our chamber pots, fetching water in plastic containers, and collecting breakfast, they remained tight-lipped about the events unfolding. However, having been in this environment for an extended period now, and well versed in the art of obtaining information, I bided my time for the opportune moment. That moment arrived when Frances, a girl with a propensity for divulging secrets for the right price, finally appeared shortly before noon. I discreetly presented him with a freshly acquired $20 bill to capture his attention. Casting a wary glance, he approached my cell door, suspicion clouding his expression. I wasted no time in posing my question, accompanied by the exchange of the blue-colored bill. Our interaction followed a familiar script. "You will be spreading this around, will you?" Francis inquired cautiously. "Francis, have I ever betrayed your confidence?" I retorted. "Remember, everyone now knows about Jonga, Charen, and Seka are alive at confinement number 1 because I confided it to you," he countered. "Francis, I was convinced from the start that they hadn't met their demise. Besides, you are not the sole guard willing to provide services and information for compensation." I proceeded to name the other 2 guards, Babu Jaju and Ablai Banjang, who could be persuaded for a mere $15 or less. My references were enough to coax Francis into lowering his voice and sharing the information I sought. He recounted the details, including a government statement that contradicted his version of events. According to Vice Chairman Kending Singate's broadcast on national radio, the conspirators, including Lieutenant Sekuba Bari, had perished in a firefight against loyal government forces. However, other folks contested this account, revealing that they had been arrested, subjected to severe torture, and subsequently executed. While some had managed to flee to Senegal, a handful had been captured and detained at Yundum Barracks. Even the PPP or AFPRC government finance minister, Mr. Babukar Banjadrame, was implicated but had managed to escape to Senegal before his arrest. The night guards on duty provided their own report, confirming that Lieutenant Sekuba Bari, Lieutenant Amadou Tal, and numerous officers had been brought to the prison in handcuffs, their distress evident as they pleaded for mercy. The intent had been to detain them in the remand wing Yet a chilling tone of events unfolded. An intervention by Samate halted their entry into the cells with Jane's orders to execute all the apprehended officers, superseding any prior plans. Subsequently, they were led away for execution, contradicting the official narrative that Topper and Singate had announced that they fought until their demise. Thank you very much. This ends chapter 13. Till next time, Juma Mubarak.